Hello, my name is Robert Kiley. I'm a poet who grew up in Cork, Ireland, currently live in London, and I'm poet in residence at University of Surrey at the moment. Um, my first encounter with Joyce was that he was a face on the Irish £10 note, which has always struck me as quite strange. Um, I read an interview recently with Fred Moten, who kind of says that he found Joyce's Ulysses to be something which he found wasn't for the bosses, and something radical and for people who wanted to tear shit up, which I really like. I like Moten's relationship to the text a lot. I'm going to read from Ithaca. I'm going to read two little sections. I'm just going to move between them, skipping over some stuff. I'm going to read from Ithaca because in lockdown, I'm sure a lot of us have encountered the question and answer quiz form. Okay. What did Bloom do at the range? He removed the saucepan to the left hob, rose and carried the iron kettle to the sink in order to tap the current by turning the faucet to let it flow. Did it flow? Yes. From Roundwood Reservoir in County Wicklow of a cubic capacity of 2.4 million gallons, percolating through a subterranean aqueduct of filtra mains of single and double pipage constructed at an initial plant cost of £5 per linear yard by way of the Dargle, Rathdown, Glen of the Downs and Callow Hill to the 26-acre reservoir at Stillorgan, a distance of 22 statute miles, and hence through a system of relieving tanks by a gradient of 250 feet to the city boundary at Eustace Bridge, Upper Leeson Street, though from prolonged summer drought and daily supply of the 12.5 million gallons the water had fallen below the sill of the overflow weir, for which reason the borough surveyor and waterworks engineer, Mr. Spencer Barry, C.E., on the instructions of the Waterworks Committee, had prohibited the use of municipal water for purposes other than those of consumption, envisaging the possibility of recourse being had to the impotable water of the Grand and Royal Canals as in 1893, particularly as the South Dublin Guardians, notwithstanding their ration of 15 gallons per day per pauper supplied through a 6-inch meter, had been convicted of a wastage of 20,000 gallons per night by a reading of their meter, on the affirmation of the law agent of the corporation, Mr. Ignatius Rice, solicitor, thereby acting to the detriment of another section of the public, self-supporting taxpayers, solvent, sound. What exchange of money took place between host and guest? Host is Bloom, guest is Stephen Dedalus. The former returned to the latter without interest a sum of money, £1 7 advanced by the latter to the former. What counter-proposals were alternately advanced, accepted, modified, declined, restated in other terms, reaccepted, ratified, reconfirmed? To inaugurate a pre-arranged course of Italian instruction, place the residence of the instructed. To inaugurate a course of vocal instruction, place the residence of the instructress. To inaugurate a series of static, semi-static, and peripatetic intellectual dialogues, places the residence of both speakers, if both speakers were resident in the same place, the Ship Hotel and Tavern, 6 Lower Abbey Street, W&E Connery, proprietors, the National Library of Ireland, 10 Kildare Street, the National Maternity Hospital, 2630 and 31 Holles Street, a public garden, the vicinity of a place of worship, a conjunction of 2 or more public thoroughfares, the point of bisection of a right line drawn between their residences if both speakers were resident in different places. What rendered problematic for Bloom the realization of these mutually self-excluding propositions? The irreparability of the past. Once at a performance of Albert Hengler's circus in the Rotunda at Rutland Square, Dublin, an intuitive parti-colored clown in quest of paternity, had penetrated from the ring to a place in the auditorium where Bloom, solitary, was seated, and had publicly declared to an exhilarated audience that he, Bloom, was his, the clown's, papa. The imprevedibility of all of the future. Once in the summer of 1898, he, Bloom, had marked a florin with 3 notches on the milled edge and tendered it in payment of an account due to and received by J&T Davy, family grocers, 1 Charlemont Mall, Grand Canal, for circulation on the waters of civic finance, for possible circuitous or direct return. Was the clown Bloom's son? No. Had Bloom's coin returned? Never. Why would a recurrent frustration the more depress him? Because at the critical turning point of human existence he desired to amend many social conditions, the product of inequality and avarice and international animosity. He believed then that human life was infinitely perfectible, eliminating these conditions. There remained the generic conditions imposed by natural, as distinct from human law, as integral parts of the human whole, the necessity of destruction to procure alimentary sustenance, the painful character of the ultimate functions of separate existence, the agonies of birth and death, the monotonous menstruation of simian and particularly human females extending from the age of puberty to the menopause, inevitable accidents at sea, in mines and factories, certain very painful maladies and their resultant surgical operations, innate lunacy and congenital criminality, decimating epidemics, catastrophic cataclysms which make terror the basis of human mentality, seismic upheavals, the epicenters of which are located in densely populated regions, the fact of vital growth, through convulsions of metamorphosis, from infancy through maturity to decay. Why did he desist from speculation? Because it was a task for a superior intelligence to substitute other more acceptable phenomena in place of the less acceptable phenomena to be removed. Did Stephen participate in his dejection? He affirmed his significance as a conscious rational animal, proceeding syllogistically from the known to the unknown, and a conscious rational regent between a micro and a macrocosm, ineluctably constructed upon the incertitude of the void. Was this affirmation apprehended by Bloom? Not verbally, substantially. What comforted his misapprehension? That as a competent, keyless citizen, he had proceeded energetically from the unknown to the known through the incertitude of the void. In what order of precedence, with what attendant ceremony, was the exodus from the house of bondage to the wilderness of inhabitation effected? Lighted candles in stick borne by Bloom, diaconal hat on ash plant borne by Stephen. With what intonation secreto of what commemorative psalm? The 113th. Modus peregrinus in exitu Israel de Egypto, damus Jacob de populo barbaro. What did each sow at the door of egress? Bloom set the candlestick on the floor. Stephen put the hat on his head. For what creature was the door of egress a door of ingress? For a cat. What spectacle confronted them when they, first the host, then the guest, emerged silently, doubly dark, from obscurity by a passage from the rear of the house into the penumbra of the garden? The heaven tree of stars, hung with humid night blue fruit. With what meditations did Bloom accompany his demonstration to his companion of various constellations? Meditations of evolution increasingly vaster, of the moon invisible and incipient lunation, approaching perigee, of the infinite litigious, scintillating, uncondensed Milky Way, discernible by daylight by an observer placed at the lower end of a cylindrical vertical shaft 5,000 foot deep sunk from the surface towards the center of the earth, of Sirius, Alpha and Canis Major, 10 light years, 57 million, must be billion, miles, distant, and in volume 900 times the dimension of our planet, of Arcturus, of the procession of equinoxes, of Orion with belt and sextuple sun, theta, and nebula, in which 100 of our solar systems could be contained, of moribund and of nascent new stars such as Nova in 1901, of our system plunging towards the constellation of Hercules, of the parallax and parallactic drift of so-called fixed stars, in reality ever moving from immeasurably remote eons to infinitely remote futures, in comparison with which the years 70 of allotted human life formed a parenthesis of infinitesimal brevity. Were their obverse meditations of involution increasingly less vast? Of the eons of geological periods recorded in the stratifications of the earth, of the myriad minute entomological organic existences congealed in cavities of the earth, beneath removable stones, in hives and mounds, of microbes, germs, bacteria, bacilli, spermatozoa, of the incalculable trillions of billions of millions of imperceptible molecules contained by cohesion of molecular affinity in a single pinhead, of the universe of human serum constellated with red and white bodies, themselves universes of void space constellated with other bodies, each in continuity, its universe of divisible component bodies, of which each was again divisible in divisions of redivisible component bodies, dividends and divisors ever diminishing without actual division till, if the progress were carried far enough, not nowhere was never reached. Why did he not elaborate these calculations to a more precise result? Because some years previously, in 1886, when occupied with the problem of the quadrature of the circle, he had learned of the existence of a number computed to a relative degree of accuracy to be of such magnitude, and of so many places, e.g. the 9th power of the 9th power of 9, that, the result having been obtained, 33 closely printed volumes of 1,000 pages each of innumerable quires and reams of India paper would have to be requisitioned in order to contain and complete the tale of its printed integers of units, tens, hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, the nucleus of the nebula of every digit of every series containing succinctly the potentiality of being raised to the utmost kinetic elaboration of any power, of any of its powers. Did he find the problem of the inhabitability of the planets and their satellites by a race given in species, and of the possible social and moral redemption of said race by a redeemer, easier of solution? Of a different order of difficulty. Conscious that the human organism, normally capable of sustaining an atmospheric pressure of 19 tons, when elevated to a considerable altitude in the terrestrial atmosphere, suffered with arithmetical progression of intensity, according to the line of demarcation between troposphere and stratosphere was approximated, from nasal hemorrhage, impeded respiration, and vertigo. When proposing this problem for solution, he had conjectured as a working hypothesis, which could not be proved impossible, that a more adaptable and differently anatomically constructed race of beings might subsist otherwise under Martian, Mercurial, Veneral, Jovian, Saturnian, Neptunian, or Uranian sufficient and equivalent conditions, though an apogean humanity of beings created in varying forms, with finite differences resulting similar to the whole and to one another, would probably there as here remain inalterably and inalienably attached to vanities of vanities, and to all that is vanity. And the problem of possible redemption, the minor was proved by the major.